It is so impressive to see so many people here tonight and to see you all get so quiet so quickly. That is impressive. It's really an honor to be here tonight to help celebrate the 50th anniversary of the World Policy Institute. I was thinking about it today as I was coming over, and I've learned from and worked with and had the pleasure of reading so much of the good work produced by the Institute for at least half, a little more than half, of those 50 years. And I see at the table right here, Arch Gillies, who's the president of the World Policy Institute back in the 1980s, when I was most intensely involved, along with Schroll Schweniger, who was the idea generator for the Institute for so much of that time. And I can say from personal experience how much of a difference the World Policy Institute and the World Policy Journal have made, especially for me, as I was saying in that time in President Clinton's campaign. Schroll and Arch and everyone involved at the Institute had really taken it upon themselves through a couple of critical projects to help create a progressive security policy for a new world, the Security Project and the American Priorities Project. And through that work, they really developed the ideas that economic security and national security are inextricable. They must go hand in hand. So many of the themes that Bill Clinton especially, but Democrats have used in the succeeding 25 years to formulate their ideas on national security and economic security, and how important it is in this new world to know that we can never be strong abroad unless we are strong at home, unless we have our priorities straight. And you know, this work, which also included the work of Robert Reich and Stan Greenberg, who still I know works with Arch today, really was distilled into what became probably the most well-known slogan of the 1992 campaign, "The Economy's Stupid," by my friend James Carville. But it took an awful lot of work to get there, and it has been an enduring legacy of the Institute, one I am proud to have been associated with. That work continues today under the leadership of Michelle Wucker, who I want to introduce right now, the president of the World Policy Institute. Her first article in the World Policy Journal in 1996 led to her first book, Why the Cocks Fight, which was published in 1999. She joined WPI as a fellow in 2000 and became executive director in 2007, president in 2009. And as I understand it, this is your first major dinner, this 50th anniversary dinner. So welcome. Come introduce.
And at first, for actually being introduced by George Stephanopoulos, who I'm such a huge fan of. It seems a bit redundant to introduce him at all, but I'll just say very, very briefly, you know him for his smart political analysis, his solid grounding in policy, and his real thought leadership over time. From a really, really sensible, constructive place, which is something that's so cherished today in a lot of the poisonous media environment we see out there, really from both sides of the political spectrum. He's ABC's chief political correspondent, anchored ABC's This Week from 2002 to 2010, came back recently, which we're very happy about. He's author of All Too Human, about the first Clinton administration in which he served. He's also a professor at Columbia University, his alma mater. And we just could not be happier to have him here, particularly since he knew the Institute at such an important time in our history, at such a pivotal time of change for the whole world, not just the United States. In a few minutes, we'll have him introduce he'll introduce our three honorees, who we're very, very happy to have with us here tonight. He'll moderate a discussion with them about some of their work, which we feel exemplifies some of the core values of the World Policy Institute: a sustainable global economy, vibrant democracy, and security defined broadly.
The whole idea tonight is to take people who come from very different walks of life, very different professions, very different interests, but to come together and share ideas and see what kind of force for change we can create through that. So let me introduce our honoree, Jahan Noujaim, a filmmaker. You might know her work, The Control Room, quite controversial, also quite illuminating. Your look inside Al Jazeera during the time of the Iraq War. You also did a film called Startup.com and have just come back. We're actually very lucky Jahan is here today. She was just telling us she almost got arrested on her flight back from Egypt. Today, she made the mistake of carrying a Syrian sword, trying to get that through customs. Not a good idea in the post-9/11 world, but we're glad to have you here today. Marcus Mabry, he's the editor-at-large of the International Herald Tribune, former international business editor of the New York Times, and for 20 years, foreign correspondent at Newsweek. Landed up as chief of correspondence. I want to get your books correct as well. You've written 2 books, one Twice as Good, Condoleezza Rice and Her Path to Power, and the memoir White Bucks and Black Eyed Peas, Coming of Age Black in White America. And Gary White of water.org. You may have heard of water.org. They have a very simple but very ambitious goal, trying to get safe water to the billion people in the world who don't have it, trying to do it in new ways. And of course, Michelle as well. But Gary, I do want to begin with you because we want to talk a little bit just about the work that each of you do. And I was struck by a phrase you had. You say that at water.org, you try to break the mold of traditional philanthropy. You have a business model that has long emphasized donor satisfaction over recipient needs. And from what I've read about it, you're really trying to create a movement by creating a market, but you say you want to seed that marketplace with a soul. What does that mean, and how does that illustrate what you're trying to do?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is to recognize that, after decades of trying to address the global water supply crisis from the perspective of the poor, and having still nearly 1 billion of the poor without access to water and 2.5 billion without sanitation, it's not working, right? So you can imagine, if we found a cure for AIDS today, and 100 years from now, there were still a child dying every 20 seconds from the disease. And when you look at the fact that we in the United States and other countries have known how to make water safe and to save lives, to wipe out cholera, dysentery, typhoid, and we haven't been able to push these solutions out to find ways to solve this crisis, then you really do have to break the mold. You have to look to see how can we look at things in an unexpected way. How do we throw off the conventional wisdom that all of the poor who lack water and sanitation are too poor to pay for solutions themselves? How can you segment the market and find those people who do have some resources and reach them with economic tools like microfinance so that they can get access to water using some of their own means? So what we're looking at is looking not at people as recipients of charity, but looking at the poor as customers, as citizens who wield incredible power, that all we have to do is help unleash that. And so with things like water credit, we're able to help people break free of loan sharks who would otherwise be paying 125% interest to get a water connection in their home or to build a toilet, and hooking them up with microfinance institutions who can help them get that water connection at a fraction of that price, and then use that extra time they spend not scavenging for water, but working at income-generating opportunities. So there's a lot of potential to be unleashed, but you have to give the system some nudges.
Marcus, let's play a little game here. When you hear a story like that, do you see yourself as an activist saying, if you want to, I want to promote that, or is that not your job? And if it's not, what is it? How do you see yourself as an agent of change?
Well, thank you, George, for that very easy question. It's a very important question. It's one that I think that we ask ourselves a lot as journalists. It's one that the public that reads us and looks at us ask themselves a lot, and there are all kinds of moral implications to it. There's a famous picture, I think it was in Ethiopia, Sudan, or Somalia, of a starving child and a bird looking at the starving child, and a photographer. And I was based in Johannesburg at one point, and the photographer who took that picture, I think it was an AP photographer, maybe a white South African AP photographer, if memory serves. There was a huge controversy over what, that photographer who had to take the picture, because someone took that picture, had food, obviously, because he was a Western photographer. What did he do? And that child died, actually. That child was one of many people, if you've ever been to a food, a camp where they're giving food to starving, displaced people or refugees, You're aware of the mass of humanity that's there. So that child was one instance of probably thousands, certainly thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people who were starving there, and probably one of hundreds, if not thousands, of starving children at that feeding center. That picture just kind of crystallizes it in a beautiful way, in a painful way, because sitting here as a member of the New York Times, the answer to your question is kind of scientifically and perhaps even uncomfortably clear. The answer is we are not activists, we are journalists. And it's uncomfortable because of that picture of that child. That's why it's uncomfortable. The fact is, if I wanted to be an activist, there are many things I could do. There are phenomenal activists, some in this room. There are many people who dedicate their lives to improving these problems, to solving these problems. That is not what we do.
You feed the activists in some way.
Well, you hope. What would you hope? And this is to the heart of your question too. Of what do I see when I hear? Well, what I hear is it's a great story. It's a great story because of a few elements. One of the elements, the most important element to make it a great story is it's counterintuitive. There is a world of prejudice, for instance. The really poor can't afford anything. The really poor can't pay for anything. So that automatically, in a world of market incentives, says there's a disincentive. Don't even think about it. If you can't give it to them for free, there's no hope. Well, that's a prejudice. That prejudice is incorrect, as we're proving every day. So there's actually hope. And in that counterintuitive reality, the fact that we can write a story that educates people that their prejudices are incorrect, that's a great story. And as a journalist, what you're always looking for are great stories. The best journalism is going to be the journalism that is not activist journalism, but it's journalism that makes people act.
You're a storyteller. Mm-hmm. You're not encumbered, perhaps, by the mainstream media. You can choose your subjects. You do choose your subjects. Do you have an audience in mind when you set out to tell the story?
I don't have an audience in mind. I think the audience is me. If I find something surprising or something that makes me think about something differently, a person or an idea, that's what I go towards. And I generally go towards subjects that I know absolutely nothing about, because I find that if you're going to spend a couple years of your life following a person or following people doing what they do best, you want to be following somebody that you feel like you can learn from. I learned from the best. I learned from Penny Baker and Chris Hedges, who've made The War Room.
You've spent much of the last year working on 2 films about at least a portion of the Arab Spring. You've been in Egypt, in the story of the revolution, and now the story of the election that will follow. Can you tell yet whether it's a happy story?
This has been one of the most incredible years of my life, following this story. I know everybody says this, it's going to be worse before it gets better, but I really do think that it's going to be, you're talking, everything's being broken apart. When everything is broken apart, there's a big mess. And now it's going to take a while for things to be put back together again. So we filmed the first part, which was basically the smashing of everything apart. It was inspiring, very inspiring to be there. And now we're watching the slow process of it's the presidential campaigns that we're following right now.
Of everything you come across at the Institute, at the Journal, which ones are exciting you the most?
What really, really interests me and excites me is the people who are generating the ideas. The people who might have a fantastic idea, but who might not otherwise be able to get a place in the pages of Foreign Affairs or get a place on a podium, or might have great ideas, are very good at expressing themselves, but don't necessarily have the skills to get those ideas to the right places. And so I think nurturing the people, really the source of those ideas, helping them to figure out what to do with it, whether it's something that Gary's doing, which is really a hybrid of doing work on the ground, but also generating ideas and interacting with people with great ideas, or something like what Jahan is doing, which is using creativity, using human stories to get people to understand each other. There's a wonderful, wonderful moment in control room where there's a U.S. military PR guy who's in the middle of this controversy over images of dead Iraqis being shown, which, Americans see them all the time and don't really react. And then there's a controversy over dead U.S. soldiers, and he sees that and all of a sudden has this aha moment in the film where he says, oh, now I get what it must be like for Iraqis to see dead Iraqis. And certainly the stuff that Marcus is doing, this traditional media thought leader, is so important. Certainly social media, a lot of what it's doing is referring back to work like what Marcus is doing. And the ability that Marcus has to have a very, very thoughtful, constructive approach to ideas. I first met him when he did a panel on Iran. He moderated for us one of our very, very first events when we went independent from the New School almost 5 years ago. And met him again when I was on a panel on Haiti after the earthquake, and was just so impressed by that idea to synthesize ideas and bring them together. So the idea is important, but it's not just the ideas, it's the environment.
In your work at water.org, you not only focus on creating those mechanisms to get the water to the people who need it, but the way you go about it is also very important to you. You define it as something you call a liquid network, which is in many ways something we're trying to create tonight. So try to draw out that idea a little more.
This whole concept of things that we learn from different directions, like the Arab Spring, for instance. What does that mean to people who don't have water and sanitation? We look at that and see that was a way for people to find their democratic voice using social media to a large degree and to mobilize themselves. And so we look to borrow ideas from other spaces. Nobody has their own complete idea. We all complete each other's idea, and that's the concept of the liquid network, where ideas can flow almost frictionlessly across sectors to different organizations and different approaches. That's why water credit worked. We didn't go out and invent microcredit. We just discovered it and nudged it towards water and sanitation and the poor. We didn't discover social media and how you create this movement, in Egypt and elsewhere, but we think we might be able to nudge that towards the poor. So the fact is that there's billions of dollars being invested every year from the top down into water infrastructure, but it doesn't find the poor. The pipes go into the cities and they go right past the slums. How do you help people to understand and participate? How do you help them hold their water utility or their government accountable for those services that are supposed to be targeted towards them in the same way your democratic vote is supposed to be targeted towards you? And how do you hold them accountable to provide those services that they're supposed to be providing? So to me, that's the liquid network. It's about discovering innovation on behalf of the poor. I mean, how do you get as much money that we invest in discovering the next generation of this iPhone? I mean, if we had a fraction of that kind of investment in water and sanitation ideas to spark new directions, I mean, we
Is
could make
there a
great
way
progress.
to make money in getting water to people who don't need it?
There is, and we don't come at it from that perspective, but we don't have a problem if a microfinance institution makes a small profit. The whole idea is, I think we're better and more respectful of the poor if we can look at them as people who have these intrinsic powers as customers and as citizens to leverage these services, whether it be through the market or through the ballot box or through protesting to get those basic services that they're entitled to.
And Marcus, you described so much of your job as telling stories, but it's also to hold those in power accountable.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting because with the, and Michelle raised that question of and we've talked about a lot tonight, social media, and new media versus the old media and the old mainstream media. I mean, for us, the kind of walls between accountability and, we used to, in our jobs, we used to talk to people and people would listen or turn us off, that was it. Well, but now people talk back to us, and so we...
And correct us immediately.
Exactly. And while some days it can be tough, right? It's incredibly powerful because leaders still pay attention to us, but also leaders, we're also conduits now for communication coming from the world back up to those leaders. And I think it makes us much more powerful. I mean, my job right now is kind of giving a digital voice to the International Herald Tribune and making it so that we have comment and community in a way that the world, this very disparate readership of the IHT, talks back to us, and through us talks to the people who matter, who read our paper. And I think that's it's kind of an exponential, multiplier of power of all of us, both the power of the voice of people, ordinary people in the Arab street, for instance, and also the power of traditional media too. All of our power grows in that kind of calculation. And we don't even know where it's going to take us yet. It's just exciting to see it all happen.
I don't think any of us know where it's going to take us. We hope a lot of you talk about that more tonight at your tables. We just wanted to get things started right now. Congratulate again our honorees.
Most of you know John Watts, but I wanted to give him a formal introduction as well. John Watts is our chairman. He's been a real champion of the Institute. He's great at conversations, got great ideas. Really was one of the people who sat down several years ago when the Institute was trying to decide what the next steps were. We sat down and had many conversations about the future of the Institute, and we both were very, very passionate about the people at the Institute and the ideas and the places where it was going. So we're really happy that he's here with us to celebrate this amazing night, which is not just our 50th anniversary, but in some ways is our fifth anniversary of our rebirth. So he and I wanted to together present the awards to our honorees. The first one is to Jahan Nujaim as the World Voice Award for her creativity. The second one is to Marcus Mabry, the World Thought Leader Award. And the third one is to water.org. Gary White has come all the way from Kansas City. So now we're going to move on to the dinner discussion, the around the table part of the evening. We see the exchange of ideas as a real catalyst for change, which is why we brought you all together around the table, so to speak, to do just that. Here's how it's going to work. Your table leaders will kick off the discussions. They'll have a question or a challenge related to one of the 5 themes, and you probably know the theme of your table already: water, migration, media and conflict, world financial risk, and new security priorities. We've asked the table leaders to make sure that all of you have a chance to participate in the conversation, so don't be shy to speak up. We want you to feel comfortable speaking freely. So please, if you talk about this after tonight, feel free to say that this is an idea you heard at around the table, but please don't attribute the ideas to any one person without their permission. We've got one assignment. You're sort of singing for your supper. At the end of the conversation, we'd like the table to have at least one sort of takeaway, one idea, which could be an idea for an article or an event or somebody who we should see if we can get involved and commission an article to, a question, something to research, a policy idea. It could be anything at all. We've passed out papers and pens. One person at the table should be responsible for writing that down. We'll come around and collect them, and that we'll take back to the Institute, and hopefully it will seed our work for the rest of the year. So with that said, I'd like to turn you all over to the capable hands of your table leaders.